They say love is the answer, they say love is the way.
What's going on? This is E40, the one and only 40 Water, with the soundtrack for the town, shouting out BAMFest 2021 International. Produced by the Lower Bottoms Players, BAMFest 2021 International from Oakland to the world, live from the Black Arts Movement District in West Oakland. Sponsored by Earl Stevens Fine Wines, man. You know what I'm talking about? Support the culture.
Your life. See, we coming with that light force. Bunk it down in the town, praying that it takes its course. Reminiscing on the beautiful places, the different faces, exotic stages. This music takes its high for real. I know that fear for real, but still. They say love is the answer, they say love is the way. Listen the world, I hope I see you again someday. Isolation, trying to find the right words to say. I love you. To the rest of the world. From Oakland to the rest of the world.
BAMFest 2021 International is 31 days of arts, culture, education, civic discourse, and networking events offered as a community celebration of our legacy of resilience, our massive reservoir of talent, and our legendary determination for equity and justice for Black people. BAMFest 2021 is a hybrid event offering both virtual and live programming. The festival is presented by the Black Arts Movement Business District, Community Development Corporation, and produced by Oakland's premier North American African Theater Company, Lower Bottom Players. Under the artistic direction of Ayodele Nzinga, MFA, PhD, the Poet Laureate of Oakland. For most information on festival programming, please head to BAMFest.com.
Word got eyes and ears on and she witnessing. Hopefully you can see a bigger picture. Slanger see you trying to turn a push into a shove, but are they listening?
Hopefully you can see a bigger picture.
Inspired by your joy, I'm gonna help you make your point. If they don't see the bigger picture, they'll get in where they slip them. It's hard to uplift them once they toe tag and split them. Inspire, help them see the bigger picture.
Hey, this is The Bigger Picture. I am Dr. Ayodele Nzinga, and today my guest is Keenan Norris, author and all-around interesting human being. You know, here on The Bigger Picture, we try to take you behind the surface so you can look at things in context and closely. So today we're going to look at writers. And more than that, we're going to look at Black writers and novel making and the process, and in particular, a brand new book by Keenan called The Confessions of Copeland Kane. Yeah. Well, all right. So, Keenan, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. I want to thank you for bringing me on The Bigger Picture, and it's an honor. I've known your work for a long time, so anytime I get to share a platform with you, it's an honor. So thank you so much for inviting me.
So I'll tell you a little bit about what we're doing, and maybe it'll sort of give you a context today. I know that there are always a million ways to answer a question, and most of them can be true, So let's give it a context or a frame. The Bigger Picture comes to you as part of BAMFest 2021 International. It's our third year doing a month-long arts and culture festival. We're really turning up the literary aspect of it this year. And when we say international, this programming is being shared throughout the diaspora. So it's been really interesting to talk to Black people all around the world about the importance of art, the importance of the word, and the importance of being a creative. So welcome, and let's dig into you for a minute, okay?
Okay.
So Who are you?
So I'm Keenan Norris. I most recently published The Confession of Copeland Kane, my most recent novel, but I've published two novels. This one also a novel a few years ago called Brother and the Dancer. I've a couple other books as well that range into different territory. I'm also an academic. I teach at San Jose State. Previously, I taught for over 10 years at the community college level all over the Bay Area. So that's some of who I am. I'm a native Californian. I'm actually native to the Inland Empire down in Southern California. My first novel set down there in the Riverside, San Bernardino area, but I've lived in Oakland for almost 20 years now. Have a lot of family in Oakland. And so long been familiar with the town. So that I think gets us started on who I am.
Okay, because nothing is ever simple, especially for brainy people who are writers. So who are you when no one's looking?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think that's a great question, because I think that people have we all get kind of conditioned to our public face, and then we have who we are internally, right? I've always considered myself an introvert. I was an only child. First couple neighborhoods that my parents lived in weren't, after I was born, weren't the best. And so I ended up, they took me to school elsewhere than where we lived, outside of our zone. And so I didn't have friends in my neighborhood. And being an only child, I grew up, largely by myself. And had a lot of my, my formative years were mostly spent with myself. And so, I think when I'm not, when nobody's watching, I'm in touch with that original self that was, created out of that loneliness, out of even the kind of experiences that brought that to be. My parents both came from big families and a lot of hardship, and so they only wanted to have one kid. So that's why I was an only child, and so I'm profoundly shaped by them. I think that when I'm alone, when nobody's looking, that I'm much quieter. First of all, I have my insecurities. I got my fears that are I'm probably more comfortable kind of airing, in the space of self. And I think it's easier to write, from there. And when I'm doing all this book stuff, it's kind of hard to get into that writer mode where you're more just expressive of the kind of totality of your mind, or totality of my mind. So I think that I'm more sensitive, I'm more emotional, yeah. Oh, yeah, I can't hear you right now. I don't know what happened. Are you?
I do. Okay. I'm
Okay.
coming to you live from the lower bottoms, and someone was revving their engine, so I muted myself. And then I made the classic Zoom mistake. I got comfortable listening to you, and I forgot to unmute me. Well, I was saying, I will ask you the same question in more than one way. So we're going to move to another drawer and open it. And this time, the label is, what's your heart song?
What's my heart song? I think that when I'm most expressive, and the part of me that is where I write most, just it's straight to the core, has to do with youth and coming of age and those kind of stories. And I feel like with this book, that was, that's what speaks to me the most, or like the first 50 pages of it. I feel like it also, like, in a way, because I don't have kids, it kind of connects me most to my forebears. That part of my life connects me most to my forebears, because there's a couple other bridges that they crossed that I haven't, and so, and then there are things, of course, like that they experience that I won't, purely because I live in a different time than they did, and so I think that when I think about like that which connects me across time and space, not universal things. I don't know if the universal really exists, but but simply just things that connect me with, with my ancestors. Yeah, it's that whole like my birth, my first like cognizance, my childhood, my adolescence, my passing these like rites of passage, these brooks of fire through which one passes, and then into adulthood, early adulthood, and I'm beyond early adulthood myself. I'm 40 years old, but in terms of when I think about like the songs that I sing most, I think most poignantly right now, most that I also have like most I don't know, expressive ability with, they're in all those formative parts of life.
So you don't know if you believe in the universe? Explain that.
I'm not sure if I believe in the universal. In the universe, yeah, the universal. Yeah, no, the universe. Yeah, I'm pretty good, pretty sure on that one. But yeah, I mean, I don't know about the universal. I mean, it's like I'd like to think that we're connected. Like that I have some connection to, I don't know, somebody like in Turkey or Afghanistan right now who, might read me, or I might read them, or I might talk to, I might hear something they say, or vice versa, and connect with that. And but, I worry that there's a lot of things where, like we don't connect. We like where, it's just, we are too different. Our experiences are too different, for there to be a human connection. So I'm not sure that I believe that. I also haven't like traveled widely enough, to know that. And so, yeah, but I just see all the divisions, that that continue in the world, and I wonder if we really are more similar than we are different,
I'd like to think that we are. I pose a question at a lot of different points in my work. Do one mother's tears weigh more than another's? I think essentially there are a few things that resonate for humans. I just think, and I think, I do hear you, because I don't know if I think that there's a normal.
Right.
And I think we're both tending the same thing. We really are shaped by the individual experiences that we have. But I think philosophically, that's one of man's great shortcomings, not to realize that, yes, we are in individual spaceships, so to speak, and that our understanding conforms to how big our windshield is. We can see. But there's all that stuff behind us that we can't see. And there's stuff that's just beyond the frame, that we think we understand, but are we even sure it's there, So I think that normal is extremely arbitrary, and it's a power loaded word, because who gets to decide what is normal?
Right.
I think that universal is perhaps more neutral. I'd like to think that everyone thinks that children should have food.
Yeah.
I'd like to think that everyone thinks that humans probably do better if they live inside.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
So I don't know if we all believe that everyone has the right to a house.
Mhm.
Then we get into those little spaces where the ways in which we've been shaped, tell us how to look at the things we see out of the windshield.
Mhm.
But I hope there are some universals. And that's kind of odd, because I don't know if I believe that there's truth. It all
Right.
depends on who's looking for what, when.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm with you. I hope that there are universals, and I don't think that I would be a writer. I don't even think I'd be a reader, let alone a writer, if I didn't hope that there were universals, you know? Because the whole idea, like we're all like in our spaceship, as you said, our individual spaceships. And there's this way that, we're always alone, you know? And yet, um, yeah, but all of life is about, like extending ourselves to, to touch somebody else's soul, right? And writing is crazy because it's kind of like, on the one hand, it's like ultimate solitude. It's like very isolated. And the connections are abstract. Like you might read my book, somebody in St. Louis might read my book 10 years from now, and they'll connect with me in that way, but it's abstract. And yet it's also can be very profound. I remember, reading, writers I remember reading William Faulkner and being like, how's this, this dead white man from Mississippi, no less, right? How am I learning so much about writing, about how to, about time, about how, the human mind understands time and understands experience, from this man. And and so I definitely hope that there are universals, and so I guess there's like that, whether it's romantic or realistic, I don't know, but yeah, I'm a doubter, but I also hope.
I think the best creators are doubters. They like to poke holes in things, they pull the curtains back, so that makes sense. So tell me about Hopeland King. How was he born?
Yeah, I started to work on this book in 2015. People have been, like the few reviews that it's gotten, people really associate it with 2020 because of the content of the book. And they're like, I think one review said something like, this book seems like it was, conceived in the pot boiler, or not the pot boiler, but some word like that, intensity of the annus horribilis of 2020. And I don't actually know what that means, but I assume that means horrible year in Latin.
Okay. Drop it in the chat. Maybe I'll look it up. The annus horribilis. Can we even say that on here?
Yeah, no, it's I learned something from from my reviews. So yeah, but it wasn't, it was not conceived out of 2020. It was conceived in 2015 in the wake of the police murders of Walter Scott, Eric Garner, and many other unarmed Black people. And while the book was that was its direct inspiration, and the kind of catalytic events of the book are twofold. Are the murder by a police officer of one of Copeland's childhood friends, and then a protest rally, right, against police violence protest rally that Copeland and his friend and some of his other friends are among the organizers of, where a police officer is then killed. Well, those are the two catalytic events. What I wanted to do was to kind of use that, maybe Trojan horse isn't the right metaphor, but it's like what comes to me. To use it as kind of to use these very, these all too familiar flashpoints in the American world as a kind of a means to get at Cope's whole story. And so law enforcement begins to publish his juvenile criminal record, which, while illegal, we know has happened many times to, stain the name of those who've been slain, who've been unjustly slain. And so, so law enforcement begins to publish that juvenile criminal record, and then Cope says, well, because they're not sticking to the facts of the case, right? I can't stick to the facts either, because they're trying to tell a story about who I am. I need to tell my own story. And so he contacts his friend who was in college, who's a journalism major, and he tells her his story, starting not from that day, but from 10 years back from there. So that's how it started. I was also really, kind of for a long time, I was obsessed with my father's story. My dad didn't really tell me much about his political involvement and so forth and so on until the last years of his life. And then, he like kind of tells me this like cascading dramatic story about how he at Fresno State was involved with the campus protest there. Actually, Marvin X was, one of the, there are two professors who were fired at Fresno State and precipitating events to these protests. One was Robert Mezzi, who published some of the early research about medicinal marijuana, the medicinal uses of marijuana. And the other was Marvin X, who was the Black Studies professor at Fresno State. And so the students were protesting their firings. They were protesting, school, protesting the city of Fresno's refusal of school busing and integration of the schools. They're protesting a number of things. The Vietnam American War, obviously, and my dad, along with many other students, was arrested and during one of the protests, and was eventually expelled from the college, and his draft status was activated. He'd already been drafted, right? But he was drafted in the big draft in 1969, but he was in school, so he had a deferment. When he lost that deferment, right, he ends up, his draft status gets activated. There's a whole long legal battle that came out of that. And so he didn't tell me about this, the last 3 or 4 years of his life. And I went into the to Fresno State's campus unrest archive. This is after he had passed, and I started doing my own research and just think about like kind of ways that I might be able to tell that story. And so I wrote one book, tried to write one book that was just like straight, journalism. And then I wrote this thing that's like not set in Fresno or not set in the 60s, set in 2030, this is how a novelist's mind works. And, I see the connections, but, and I wanted to kind of maybe imagine what a kid like he was, how that kid would turn out in the near future in Bay Area, California. So.
Wow. Wow. Your dad's life sounds fascinating. Everybody's got a story.
Yeah.
Let's stick with Copeland for a moment. Would you like to share some of what?
Yeah.
All right.
All right. So this comes from the very start of Copeland's so-called confession. They already arrested Keisha Free and DeMichael. Snatched them up easy because So Clear done searched out their location. Then law enforcement did that criminal contact tracing thing, followed them from their phones and whatnot, bagged them up. Long as we're talking technology, boss, you might as well know my audio comes to you unencrypted in this bootleg old pre-Sage voice app, the most off-brand, unheard of cell phone app you will ever encounter. It calls itself the Cayman Island apps. Don't ask how I got this mess on my phone. It's all yours truly got to work with right now. So you might have to trust me on this one, even if you're not trying to trust this technology. Real talk, Jack. I only ask that the people hear me all the way out. It won't jeopardize y'all no kind of way, except maybe in y'all feelings. I can't tell you about your heart, Jack, but I'm gonna tell you what's in mine. Nobody want to hear why shit hit such a swerve and went so left. But the fact is, it was all kind of facts, done built up to the one big fact. Excuse me, edit that. The one pivotal incident that everybody and their mama cares so much about. The crime in question, the weed that worked its way up from spoil soil to choke the chief gardener. Now I'm giving testimony the only way I know how, without having Mr. Miranda's rights read to me. I'm making a real record right now, not just how that man guy got, but about everything that got me here. Copeland Kane, the alleged accomplice, the fugitive, the ghost, the rabbit, the radiated, remediated, medicated, incarcerated, the child who fell out of colored people time and into America. The whole deal. To go against the apex predator they steady creating me into on the news beat every 5 minutes. And fair warning, I tend to tell 3 stories to tell one and get sidetracked sometimes. But I'm gonna try and not do that shit. Now, since they want to go and air me out about for everything I done did since I done crawled out the crib, here's some back in the day. I'm Copeland Kane the Fifth. There's probably more than 5 of me in our history. We just don't have the records on that. They say the name comes from a plantation, the Copeland Plantation in Louisiana, that after slavery ended, my people came with that given name to Oklahoma, Greenwood. And yes, my folks did get torched about that mug when the white people went and burned up Black Wall Street, murdering 300 some people of the sun. At least that's why I believe they left. I know for a fact the fam fled out that bitch on account of something mean June 1921. Them and all of Oakland's Oklahoma ancestors done came out west, no turnbacks. Not one piddling pillar of salt left behind, as Daddy would say. But now that old man does look back and he blames himself. Like my predicament can be put down to his parenting. But a real Spielkirk Flood Field, deep in the heart of East Oakland, that old man's always been around for me, which is more most kids can count on from their father. Even if truth be told, mine was too much around for me. Yes, back in the day, Daddy had me surrounded. He was everything to me, even if by the accounting of the government, he barely existed. Having no employment, no property, no credit, just a social security number and a name. When it came to work, he stayed unemployed, or he stayed employing himself, mostly unsuccessfully, which ain't much different, am I right? Now, don't get it twisted. The old man was a hard worker. Had him his tools, his parts and pieces, plots and plans drawn up and scribbled down on Post-it notes and loose sheets of paper that was scattered around the apartment like so many surprises. He was an inventor, you dig? His mind never rested, never let me rest neither. On God, Jack, any hour I wasn't in school had me on work detail. Inventors need laborers after all. So I served as Daddy's workforce no matter the project. Sweep that porch, go pass out these flyers, knock on them doors, haul this water, run tell that to him, her, them, the man on the telephone, the customer over there, the icy motherfucker with the permits, and the mad on about anything and everything east downtown. And while you're at it, dodge a stray hungry dog or two. Wasn't no money in it neither. Once in a blue, the old man would throw me a couple cowrie shells. Here, just so you don't go hollering to your teacher or your mom about no slavery. Don't go asking for no salary though. That food on your plate, clothes on your back, roof over your head, the CEO money damn near. Focus, boy, you would say. We try and make something of ourselves. And from this young Sahab's perspective, my old man's vocation made about as much sense as Arabic. wasn't nobody else's father trying to invent anything when the post office was hiring and shit. But with time and experience, now I see his inventions as the natural response to an East Oakland existence. But with all the tests and experiments and other mess we done had ran on us, what else could a man do but start experimenting his own self? If the old man had a problem, it wasn't his career choice. It was that he wanted to make more of himself than the world would allow. Daddy dreamt of uplifting our neighborhood and overcoming it all at once, making millions off a code switching app, a black business magnet, and anything else you couldn't think of, but he could. But selling dreams to broke folks who ain't seen the inside of their eyelids in who knows how long. Well, suffice it to say, Daddy's dreams was always a little outside his reach. Meanwhile, Rockwood remained well within our grasp. The Rock, that towering old East Oakland apartment complex, which, like Daddy, didn't fit the description. Understand, Rockwood was not the hood. Not in the 2010s it wasn't. That whole line about our buildings being Oakland's last housing project, which they sold us all the way to the wrecking balls, that would have been news to us residents back in the day when I was knee-high to a Nike shoe. To the contrary, the Rock was actually tranquilo. Come to think of it, I'm not sure if we was even all that poor, or if the city just got too damn expensive. But most folks that lost jobs in 20 found worse ones in 21 and ain't really recovered since. Those losses alone labeled our neighborhood. But it wasn't a homeless camp on every corner back in the day. It wasn't all these compounds for rich folk just flaunting their wealth right in front of us. The wealthy was strictly segregated to downtown back then. And with it being less of the extremes in the streets, it wasn't so common for folks to cover the next man's bag, let alone for them to gank it at gunpoint. We lived in an apartment complex, not a housing project, a neighborhood, not a quarantine zone. It was only as I got older and the housing projects nearby, but while Ravens Court and Arrest was raised, that the place where we lived was deemed guilty by its disassociation from the future of the city, from this future state that don't even want to include us. But it wasn't always like this. In the beginning, Oakland was rough, sure enough, but so clear, that thing y'all call America was a million miles away. As long as we played close, life and death felt safe on the Rock.
Where we can get this delicious book from?
Unnamed Press, kind enough to publish it. So yeah, you know, just all the regular outlets. The audiobook I think just came out a couple of days ago on Audible. But yeah, so Amazon obviously has it because Audible part of Amazon. You know, but I would encourage people to, you know, to support small business, small presses, and buy it from Unnamed Press.
All right. Unnamed Press is where we should go to get the Confessions of Copeland Kane. So we talked about universals and creatives. I'm of the opinion that when we create work, that the work has work to do. What's Copeland's work?
That's a great question. I think the book, which is essentially Copeland's story, right? His telling of his story. Like it's work. It's calling is to tell who he is. It's not to, you know, it's not a politics. It's not an agenda item. It's not a, you know, it's not a thesis statement or a history of this or that. It's his story, right? And I think the story is told through, you know, what he does and what happens to him, but it's also told through like how he particularly tells the story. I wanted his voice to kind of be a blend of different things. You know, I didn't want it to just be kind of stereotypical. I didn't want it to be the product of like one set of slang. I didn't want it to be the product of, you know, of his education, which, you know, like Cope ends up at a private school late, you know, late in his early life, and you know, and does a lot of reading and so forth. And so, like, there are many strands from which his voice emerges. And so, a lot of the work of the book is the work of the voice, and so I think you know, in talking to people who've read it, reading, you know, and just people's responses that I've seen, that's most of what they vibe with. It seems like is just like his observations, his just way of seeing the world. And for me, that's always like the kind of literature that I like most. Is like, I'm not that big on plot. I've gotten better at writing plot over the years, but I'm really, you know, it's like what happens in between the things that happen that really interests me when I read, you know, or even when I just listen to somebody tell a story. And so it's like their voice and the way they describe something that really moves me or stays with me. And so, so that was a big part of it. I also wanted, like, to kind of make a case for this kind of hybrid voice as being one legitimate. Like, I think there's like a lot of you know, teaching in, you know, MFA programs and just creative writing classes that voice must be consistent. But, you know, our voices are, you know, by consistent means like consistent in terms of like it's the class demographic that it's going to kind of manifest or express. Consistent in terms of its, you know, culturally and all this stuff. And I don't really buy that, especially not in a place like Oakland, where, you know, you have a lot of, you know, a lot of kind of different waves of different people crossing over each other and impacting each other. I remember the first time I heard, you know, I remember being in this liquor store and hearing this guy over my shoulder. He sounded like E40, and when I turned around, he was a big Asian cat, and I was just like, I never seen you know, Asian person who sounded like that before, because I had just moved to Oakland. And so you know, there's like so what am I trying to say? I guess what I'm trying to say is I wanted to make a case for like the irregularity of voice in the present day, and how that's like that's legitimate, you know, as a way to tell a story.
All right. So in terms of process for you, what does creating look like? Give us the big bullet points. What does it take to write a novel, Professor Norris?
Yeah, I don't know.
You ever finish and you're sort of surprised, like,
yeah.
wow, I wrote it. It's a whole
Yeah.
thing and it makes sense.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I'm totally surprised. I go into like, oftentimes I can't remember like the passages of time when I was writing, like it sort of used to feel like a fugue state or something. Yeah, I mean, because I can write for like 10 hours straight, you know, and just like drink water and, you know, and forget to eat and everything. I can go for a long periods of time, but it's not necessarily like the most totally rational and calculated part of my existence. I will say that it, like, at least for me, it's important to break up a big story, like a novel, into kind of big sections, that are like big and simple. Like, you know, so this book, it's like Copeland's childhood, then he gets in trouble, and you got his second part of the story where he goes to juvie. Then you got third part of his story where he comes back and you know, becomes a, you know, an athlete and all this stuff, and goes to private school. And you have the fourth part of the story. And so like that was like real simple, these simple 4 parts of the story, 4 acts. So for me, I need something like that. If it was to be a more complex story, I'd still need, maybe 8 or 10 discrete parts. And then that kind of gives me the freedom to, and I say this too, I need like initial inspiration. I can't just have like an idea to write a story. I don't really care about that, I mean, but it has to be like an inspiration to tell, to understand these characters, to explore these characters, these people, and to like just really get to know them again, to like get at the things that happen between the things that happen. And so, there might be like a turn of phrase that I'm just like obsessed with, or a moment in time, something that somebody sees, or that I've seen, that I want to tell about, in the proper felt context that I felt it and experienced it. And so something like that, and I'm driving at it. And so I need that. And then I need the big structure points. And then like that allows me then to kind of have a goal, a short-term goal. I'm trying to write to this little thing that, and then it gives me some structure so that if I come to a point and I don't know where I'm going, I just skip ahead and start writing the next part, and hopefully come back later and fill it in. The other thing I think, and I don't know how this goes over with students because it's so simplistic, but I don't know, it matters to me. Like I need some faith to write a novel, because, and I don't mean necessarily religious faith, but just faith, that, that my imaginings have some sort of meaning to me or somebody else, that if they are absurd, that they, that itself might, might be important in some sort of way. So I feel like just having a sort of foundational faith in what I'm attempting is really important. Yeah. Yeah, and then just like not like also by the same token, like not caring so much that like like I'm having to constantly go back and rewrite, that didn't, you never get anything done. So like some embracing the absurd as well, embracing just this may not turn into anything, I mean, as I have written things that haven't gone anywhere. And so, and every writer has, right?
I was going to say, I don't know a writer worth their salt that hasn't,
Yeah, absolutely. And so, so you kind of have to embrace that and just have some fun with it. Like, okay, okay, oh, well,
Is there a story hanging around that you want to tell
Oh,
that
yeah.
you haven't got to yet?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It sounds like maybe more than one, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
All right, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
I call that infinite flow.
Oh, yeah.
I figured if I lived twice as long as they're probably going to let me, I'd probably still die with a big book full of untouched ideas. May it always be so.
Powerful. That's powerful.
So, as a writer, besides telling stories, what's your goal?
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. I think that I want to tell something about like California and what it is to be Black in California, what it has been over maybe the last, it's like post-World War II, what it's been to be Black in California. And I think that's where some of my next novel will go to, is back into the 50s, 60s, 70s in California, in the Central Valley. I want to touch all these different parts of California. I'm very much a Californian, and so born, raised, and et cetera, et cetera. And so I feel like, just sort of embracing that identity, And in my life has taken me to all these different places. My mother's side of the family is from the Central Valley, and we're field hands and farm workers. And, then my dad's side of the family is much more urban and all that. And then I grew up down basically in the desert and moved up here. And so so I know a lot about all the different parts of California. And so I think, and then with my, academic background and working for the Oxford African American Studies Center, building up their California archive in the last few years, I've learned a lot more about California's Black history, and it's like even its deeper Black history, and so as further back. And so telling some of those stories and telling them maybe one, like, you'd be surprised, there is no like just history of Black California. You just figured that there would be a textbook, and there isn't. There's the literary anthology, Black California, that Heyday Books put out a few years ago. There's the book on Los Angeles, what Darnell Hunt did. There's a few books about, that like segmented off. There's Jan Adkins, a friend of mine who wrote, a book on the history of Black San Francisco, and probably others about the Bay Area. But I mean, I looked high and low. Other people, somebody probably proved me wrong sooner or later, but I don't believe that there is just one comprehensive book. And that kind of tells you, even in 2021, that there's so much yet to do, and I'm not a historian. I'm not like that kind of academic. And so I feel like I can tell different kinds of stories, and stories that are more off the grid. When I talk about Black folks, in the fields, when I've written about Black folks in the fields, my book that came out through Nomadic Press, a chapbook by the Lemon Tree. It's, most of the stories are in the Central Valley. People are like, there are Black people there, and they have no idea, right? But whole half of my family's from there, so I know a lot about that. And so I want to tell these, some of these stories that have that are under the radar. And so I think they're like, I guess to answer your question, I guess it has to do with a certain kind of maybe reclamation, or kind of reclamation of things that are in danger of being lost. There's specific kinds of stories that I want to tell.
I think being in California is special in a lot of ways. I think that things have happened in Oakland, California, that have affected the trajectory of struggle and social justice around the world. Mm-hmm. I think that the West Coast was one of the bookends in the Black arts movement. Mm-hmm. I heard you say that you're not widely traveled. It's something that we have in common. Mm-hmm. Books have always made me feel much more traveled than I am, Mm-hmm. And I think it's the thing too about being an academic. I know a lot about a lot about a lot of different things. So I feel worldly. Right. In my excursions outside of California, I've been shown how much of a Californian I am. California is a very special place. It is, we live in a bubble, bruh. We're not fit for some of the rest of the United States. We get in trouble. We think things and we think like it's okay for us to think this. And if we think it, then surely we can say it. Mm-hmm. And I don't even know what an uppity Negro is. I mean, we're just cultured folks. We know things, right? So this does not play well all across the 50 states, right? So that's the thing. And I wonder if if you've thought about that. I mean, will you travel on purpose? You know, to sort of put
Mhm.
privilege and
Right.
the actual just purple ass magic of being a Californian
Uh-huh.
into perspective before you start?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. So I mean I've traveled some, I've traveled some, but I'm definitely not well traveled. So I've spent some time, or I've visited the South on, different parts of the South on occasion. New Orleans, Atlanta, wherever else I've been, Florida. And so yeah, I mean, as you said, things are really different in a lot of ways. I mean, there are a lot of things I prefer, maybe not a lot. There are some things I prefer about the South. Um, there's a lot of rules here. And I think that we learn so much from all these different places. My dad was actually from Chicago. And so when I was trying to first tell his story more journalistically, I traveled to Chicago and to the West Side and spent some time there. Um, to kind of to do the research, but also to just get something of what I can understand of the vibe of what things might have been like for him back in the day. Yeah, I mean, California is so different, and California is just a very different place. I think what and I have family from all over the country, and so I'm aware that I think that California's also changed a lot just in my lifetime. Like it's very different. I don't know if that's just because I moved to the Bay or what. Because I feel like I kind of came from the Alabama part of California, where
What's
there was
the
a lot
Alabama
of
part?
the Alabama part of California.
Where's that at exactly?
Out in the Inland Empire, out Rialto, San Bernardino, Colton, out there, Hemet, all those. Yeah, I mean, there's certain things I won't say right now, but there's there were people who definitely didn't want us there. I have an essay that I published about a year ago called "One Coyote" about when we moved to the suburbs, the man who you know um, called us. I don't know what I can say on it. Anyway, called us up every day and sticked his pit bull on me, and there was definitely some unreconstructed folks out there, and so it was when I was a little kid, and so the I think California's changed a lot. It's gotten much more liberal. It has become, much more, just kind of cultured. Use your words. Become much more cultured, and so I feel like, it's such a trip, like talking to my students who are much younger than me, and then say talking to my relatives who are older than me, they're from the country, and it's like two different worlds. It's like, just the experience, the way the way they talk about things, the way they see things. And I feel like I'm somewhere in between, in kind of a crossover character myself, going back and forth. Yeah, it's very strange. So I don't totally understand California, but I know I am a Californian,
Well, somebody told me once it was as far west as you could go without
Mhm.
falling into the ocean. So
Mhm.
the idea of trying to find America,
Mhm.
the dream, the endless possibility,
Mhm.
streets of gold. You
Mhm.
go
Mhm.
as far west as we could go without falling into the ocean. And then there is a kind of, there's a, the last place I went was Virginia.
Okay.
And I was struck by the civility of the racism.
Mhm.
There were, I mean, I thought being from the town where there is the police then there's the Housing Authority Police, and then there's the BART Police, and then
Mhm.
there's the Postal Police, and then there's the Sheriff, you know, the Park Police. I thought I knew about police.
Mhm.
In Virginia, I think that there are approximately 35 different police agencies, and they all have free reign. I mean, we're talking about from the FBI down, and everybody's on the street, right? So I was there for about a week. Every day when we left and moved around,
Mhm.
you were always going to see 3 or 4 people pulled over.
Mhm.
Now, and in Oakland, there were actually days I don't see people pulled over at all.
Mhm.
Oh, and then there are them days, those periods of time, right,
Mhm.
where everything's sirens. What occurred to me is that the racism was palpable. There's just no doubt that the South is not healed and reconciled itself from racism. This is very apparent. I would not say that Black people were docile. I would say more, they were very aware of where they were.
Mhm.
They were very aware of what was acceptable and what wasn't acceptable. And on a good day, people wanted to go home. And so there's certain things you didn't entertain, because if you entertain these things, then you're not going home. I mean, there was everything one might expect that you would find. There were liquor stores, people stood outside liquor stores, people who I am sure were exchanging illegal substances, you know, but it was done in they're parks that you can't be in after 7 o'clock. I was struck by how green it was, how, you know, you think about California as being a green space. You don't really know what greenness is until you go back south, you know? It was so green. It was also very clean. But then the idea of parks, there was a park in every single neighborhood. I could not go 20 or 30 blocks and not encounter a park. But all of the parks in the Black neighborhoods had very prominent signs that said the park is closed at 7 o'clock. And then the week that I was there and passing around, it seemed like everybody know the park closed at 7 o'clock because wasn't nobody there. So it was almost like it left room for a genteel form of racism. You didn't have to ride people down. I didn't see any people with their sheets over their heads or their billy clubs, but they don't need them. And my spirit was just, I was glad when it was time to come home. It was just so much swallowing of everything, and everybody just agreeing that if we just don't rub each other the wrong way, things can just stay like this and it'll be okay. Very unsettling, and it let me know, and it made me appreciate that it is different to live in California, you know.
Can I dovetail off that real quick? Say something. I interviewed Kiese Layman a few months ago, and great, Mississippi-based writer, and I asked this question. It was in the Zoom, it was like during COVID, so it was in the Zoom world, and with the chat going, and there's a lot of, because he's famous, there are a lot of people on the call, and they're writing all kinds of things in the chat. I asked him a question because my father abhorred the South, and had barely been there in his life and had no interest in ever setting foot there. My grandparents were all from the South, all from Mississippi and Alabama. And I was telling him that, there, is amongst Black people in the North and Black people in the West Coast, it's often been, Mississippi has a particular stigma, associated with it. Nina Simone, Mississippi goddamn, and, Chris Rock has some bit where he says, Mississippi is the biggest pile of racist dirt in the world and things like that. And so I'm kind of creating the context for my question. My question was going to be, tell us, what we out here don't understand or don't know about your Mississippi. But in the course of building the context, right, somebody chimes in I'm gonna assume this is a Black person, chimes in the chat and says the only people I know who say anything, talk mess about Mississippi are white people. And I knew it was not only a Black person, but also a Black person in Mississippi or in the South. Because I was like, that's part of why, like as an intra-racial thing that I feel like so many of our folks left, maybe, your parents or grandparents left the South, like them, it was like so stigmatized. I don't know, how do you feel about that? Like, that stigma, and then kind of having to, going back there and noting the nuances. Like, how did you feel about all that?
My people are from State Line, Mississippi. And my great-grandfather owned a farm after Reconstruction. Poor little worst patch of dirt, they sold it to a Black man, and he thought he was uppity because he didn't know he should be a sharecropper. My great-grandparents were horse eaters. I wrote a book about it. The horse eaters at the, first of all, it was something to own land. Then to hold on to the land became a whole thing. I think it is hard for people to understand today what a huge accomplishment that must have been, and how difficult it was to get any of the things that you needed to make life. Because you were freed into nothing with nothing in most circumstances, and in a hostile environment. So it was a agrarian life, and a very lean agrarian life, in which I believe my ancestors did what a lot of Black people did. They lost their romance with the land. It was hard, the legacy of horse eaters is that during a bad season, the crops won't grow. Rather than having a horse, first of all, is a luxury. Having an animal to plow the fields, so that they weren't being plowed by a person just pulling the plow, was a thing. Okay. So to be able to own horses, and of course you need other livestock. If you were really blessed, you had a herd of cows. If you were not, you had a cow because you would have milk, right? So when it got really lean, rather than go into too deep a debt with the company store, never endanger the land, because you have to have the land to pass on. This was at a point in time when my great-grandparents understood the connection between life and the land. So in really bad seasons, if you didn't make any money, you'd eat your livestock. The last thing you would eat would be your horses. If it was a really, really bad winter, you ate the horses too. All of this to be able to hold on to land, to be able to give your kids land. And my grandmother's generation was the generation who sold that land to go to the city. Some of them went to the city in Mobile and other bigger parts of Mississippi and Alabama. They went to school. They became teachers and accountants and things that no one had ever been in our family before. They got book learning and degrees, and there's a beauty in that. They wanted more than the leanness that the land afforded them. My grandmother followed her brother to California. Her brother had come to California and was a real estate agent. And so she came to California. My mother, in the middle, ran away from home. And she hitchhiked down Route 66. You can leave the South and go all the way to the West. You can make it so far west if you keep walking, you end up in the ocean. So my mother stole away. I actually got left in the South. My grandmother came to Chicago and took me home from the hospital back to State Line, Mississippi. And then I came to California with my grandmother when she came looking for her daughter and following her brother. I'm really connected to the idea that the tale of migrants is a story told by white people afterwards. It is the story of the Black refugees who left the South to recreate themselves, or who even stayed within the South, but left agrarian situations, went to the city to try to remake themselves into something that could flourish in America, you know?
Yeah.
I've recently become aware of we often talk about the Igbos who almost 2-to-1 jumped ship. How not a lot of Igbos made it here. And aren't you glad that you're not an Igbo, because you wouldn't be here, right? So there's something to be said for those who remain, because that's how some of us got here.
Right.
So I think that there's a tale to be told about the Black farmer in the South. And I think it's a tale that people don't widely know. Only 5% of farms in the South are actually owned by Black people. And that was so interesting, considering how it wouldn't be no farms in the South if it wasn't for Black people, you know. I imagine it's I can imagine it's the whole thing, because they are the people who stayed.
Right.
They are the people who stayed, you know. And so maybe the refugees are like the Igbos, you know. We all jumped ship, you know. So I think that I have a particular stereotypical fear of the South. I remember going never back to State Line, but I had a stepfather who had relatives in Texas and Oklahoma. And I can remember the long trips in the back of a station wagon with other kids on your lap across the country. But I think I have a stereotypical dread of the South from the things that we've heard. It was triggering to be in Virginia. They got a lot of 500-year-old trees. And it was triggering to wonder how many of them that people might have swung from at one time. It was triggering the passive white supremacy and the almost passive acknowledgement that unless we want to kill a bunch of white people today, if we just be quiet, we can get to where we're going, and nobody got no time for all that. That was very triggering for my California self, you know. But then overall, what bothers me is, so I realize I live in California, and that's kind of beautiful and purple. It's home of Hollywood. You get to dream, all this wonderful stuff, right?
Right.
I'm not always happy in California.
Right.
So what does that say about me, my American blues, you know? So I know that I have to stay in California, because I probably get strung up anywhere else, but I ain't happy in California. Right. So this leads to some of my rap questions for you. Here's where we leave literature for a while and ask you, what does it take to make a change? What do we need? What do you think that Black folks need a change here? And if we do, what does it take for us to get that change? Not even asking you what the change needs to be. How do we get from here to there?
Yeah. I mean, I think that kind of more deeply than any kind of material loss that, you know, we've incurred because of our history in this land, these lands, is the psychological toll, you know, self-hatred, mistrust, you know, amongst us, you know, the mistrust, I could just go on and on about the all that. And so I think it's like we need to rebuild our psyches, you know, like we need to rebuild our psyches. And I think we also need to, in doing that, we need to have like the equivalent of like truth and reconciliation between one another, you know, because like, I don't know, like when all this, like a few years ago, when all this like, and this is what I'm talking about when I say like California's changed so much in the last, you know, since in my lifetime, is, you know, all this stuff like Oscar So White and all this, like I remember when, you know, we didn't really care whether, you know, we didn't expect them to, you know, to acknowledge us. And so we were just doing our thing. And, you know, and you know, if a Black movie came out, all the Black people went and saw it, you know. I'd probably tell you about every Black movie that was made until 2010 or whatever, you know, and because that was just, you know, just what we did. And so I guess I say that to say that there's a way in which I think we need to come back to just that hard-eyed reality, that hard-eyed understanding that, you know, we have to depend on ourselves. We can't depend on the nation or on white folks or anybody else. We need to build each other back up, and we need to also make amends with each other, you know, because they're, you know, just being real about it, right? I mean, you know, all violence is not state violence, you know, all violence is not state violence. All, you know, hurt isn't, you know, it doesn't come from the outside. You know, unfortunately, tragically, right, Black people, we've harmed each other too. And so I think that there needs to be some, you know, something that's like not governmental, doesn't have to do with the law, doesn't have to do with psychologists even, you know, but just within people's families, within people's communities, you know, we need to, you know, come to peace with one another, you know, and then, you know, and that'll help us come to peace with ourselves. I think that that's very important. I think that, you know, because I think that we, how do I put this? Like, when I've traveled abroad and gone to other places where there are a lot of Black people, there tends to be like a different focus. The focus is more on, you know, there is, especially in what you call it, you know, in Latin America, there's more of a sense that you know, that you know, like race is not race, and kind of political advocacy around race is not as prioritized as it is here. And I'm actually pretty critical of that, in that I think that, you know, Black people here, like we represented, we created some sense of solidarity with one another, and we advocated for our rights and for the rights of our brothers and sisters, and we made substantial material gains that haven't necessarily been seen in some other places, where there are, you know, just as many Black people per capita as are here or more. That, you know, that said, I think that sometimes like that too external focus, like there just has to be a balance, you know, because it's not one or the other. It's not like, you know, it's not just the man vamping down on us. It's not just us doing things to each other. Like it's both, and just have to recognize both, acknowledge both, and deal with both, you know. And so I think that and I think we get like too locked into the binary of, okay, if you're talking about this, you can't be talking about that, or if you're talking about, you know, and that's not real. And so, or it's too locked in. It's not real, it's too locked in, too ideological. And so, so I think that's important. But
I think this has been a delicious talk. And I was looking forward to hearing you read again, but I'm sort of looking at the clock in the side of the screen here. And if we were to wrap this in the next 2 or 3 minutes, we'd have probably a really lovely hour. And if we keep talking, then I've got to lose something, and I don't want to lose anything. This has truly been a pleasure. I would like for you to tell us, would you give us the title of all of your novels, please, of the last 3, and tell us where we can get them all?
Yeah. So most recent novel, The Confession of Copeland Kane, from Unnamed Press. My first novel is titled Brother and the Dancer. It is available through Heyday Books. You can also contact me for that book because I got a bunch of the copies myself at keenan.norris@sjsu.edu. So you can also just go through me. Let me see. I have a chapbook by The Lemon Tree from Nomadic Press. And I've got a critical anthology, which I edited, about street lit, called Street Lit, through Scarecrow Press. So those are my books.
Well, all right. He is not hard to find and more than worth the read. So I encourage everybody, go out and buy all of his books. All right. Thank you so much, Keenan.
Thank you.
I look forward to spending time with you in the near future. Hey, I've got a great idea. This laureate thing, man. You got to come and read. And we're going to mix it up. Why can't we do literary passages and then poems that sort of bounce off each other? Let's go do some stuff they ain't doing.
That would be dope. I meant to, I know I did it via Facebook, but I meant to, say, congratulations on being Oakland's first poet laureate. I always just thought of you as, a poet laureate of Oakland anyway. So it's,
Hey, me too. So it's extremely fitting that there's actually really a title now. And it would be really awkward if they'd given it to someone else. So this works out nice. Okay. But I'm serious. Let's put it to use. I am very much into the thought of let's do some stuff nobody else is doing. So I'll be in touch. All right. Keenan Norris, everybody. Thank you.
Peace.
Bye-bye.
They say love is the answer. They say love is the way.
What's going on? This is E40, the one and only 40 Water, with the soundtrack for the town, shouting out BAMFest 2021 International. Produced by the Lower Bottoms Players, BAMFest 2021 International, from Oakland to the world, live from the Black Arts Movement District in West Oakland. Sponsored by Earl Stevens Fine Wines, man. You know what I'm talking about? Support the culture.
Your life, see we coming with that light force, bunker down in the town, praying that it takes its course, reminiscing on the beautiful places, the different faces, exotic stages, this music takes its high for real. I know that fear for real, but still, they say love is the answer, they say love is the way. Missing the world, I hope I see you again someday. Isolation, trying to find the right words to say. I love you. To the rest of the world, from Oakland to the rest of the world.
BAMFest 2021 International is 31 days of art, culture, education, civic discourse, and networking events offered as a community celebration of our legacy of resilience, our massive reservoir of talent, and our legendary determination for equity and justice for Black people. BAMFest 2021 is a hybrid event offering both virtual and live programming. The festival is presented by the Black Arts Movement Business District, Community Development Corporation, and produced by Oakland's premier North American African Theater Company, Lower Bottom Players. Under the artistic direction of Ayodele Nzinga, MFA, PhD, the Poet Laureate. of Oakland. For most information on festival programming, please head to BatonFest.com.